Ready. Hi. Hi, everybody. My name is Robert.
Tell that now you have microphone on.
Okay, yep, microphone's on for Feldman.
Oh,
Okay.
wonderful. Yeah, he just doesn't have a picture, so that's good. That's okay.
One picture. We just came from the beach.
Okay, we're getting ready to start now.
Thank you.
He's
Okay.
Congregation Beth Jacob of Galveston.
Okay, we'll go through introductions.
Yeah. At any rate, my name is Robert Loeb, and I'm here in Houston. I'm a board member of JCLP. I spent 40 years in Victoria, Texas, and used JCLP to lead our congregation. They helped our congregation a lot about 10 years ago, and then I moved to Houston with my wife, and then Noah and David Sarnett asked me to go on the board, and so I've been on the board for 2 or 3 years. I'm glad just to kind of lead off this group. We've got three great, very knowledgeable security people that are going to talk about security for our congregations. And then we have Noah, who is our executive director and really leads everything. Noah, do you want to go ahead and do the introduction?
Leave everything alone.
I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call your name, and when I call your name, why don't you introduce yourself and your community and your position. So Bram, and make sure you unmute yourself before you talk. Bram.
Hi, Bram Weissman, and I'm the security chairman for Congregation Orem in Houston.
Thank you. Joan.
Joan Linares. I'm in Baytown with Congregation Knesset Israel. I'm the current president. I'm also the president of the Texas Jewish Historical Society.
Oh,
Great. David.
David Blumberg in Laredo, Texas, with Congregation Agudas Achim. I'm the board secretary, and I'm the coordinator for the remodeling, the hardening of our facility. We have a $150,000 grant we got from the government a couple of years ago that we're finally working out.
Great. Harry.
I'm Harry Ray. I'm from Dallas. I'm vice president at Congregation Ner Tamid.
There's some
In Denton. Thank you.
And
Kimberly.
I'm Kimberly Walls. I'm the vice president of Congregation Ahavath Achim in Tyler.
Shana.
Hi, I'm Shanna Bauman. I'm treasurer of the Congregation Knesset Israel in Baytown, Texas. I'm also on the board of the Texas Jewish Historical Society.
And where are you right now?
I am in Alon Shavut, Israel, awaiting the birth of my first grandbaby.
Mazel tov. Peggy.
Peggy Green with Congregation Beth Jacob in Galveston, Texas, and I'm the president. And Steve is coming from the beach.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Nez, Texas.
I'm Nez Gross, and I am from Congregation Bethel, the Reform Congregation in Tyler, Texas, and I'm vice president.
Thank you. Larry.
I'm Larry Dov Chaim Bachlier at Temple B'nai Israel up in Amarillo. I am the past president and the security chair.
Newt Scott still there.
Great. Mike Fergatch, are you able to chat who you are? Mike Fergatch, Temple Bethel, Brownsville, Texas, treasurer. Thanks, Mike. Let's see, Jennifer.
In Houston, Texas.
Jennifer, go ahead, say it again because you were.
Sure, yeah, Jennifer Bonnet. I'm the president of Congregation Orem here in Houston, Texas.
Great. Is Kran Steve Feldman?
That's my wife.
Okay, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Steve Feldman, just member of Congregation Beth Jacob here in Galveston.
Great. And we had one more person on the iPhone.
Yeah, sorry. I'm trying to, I couldn't get my camera to work. This is Andrew Friedman. I am the Vice President of Congregation Cherith Israel in Lubbock, Texas, and also the Security Chair.
Great. Well, welcome all.
We have
Before
one
turn-
more, Michael Tobes.
Oh, Michael, sorry.
It's all right. I'm president of Congregation Avat Hachim in Tyler, Texas.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Before I turn over to Robert, I'll just be real quick. Jewish Community Legacy Project is a nonprofit. We work exclusively with small congregations all over the country. And we do one thing and one thing only. We help congregations plan, those who have issues that they need to address currently, and those that have long-term issues that they would like to develop legacy plans. Work with over 100 congregations. Another 100 congregations have come to us with various questions. We don't charge for our services. Our funding is from the Marcus Foundation, the Mandel Foundation, and others. So we don't represent any organization, although we are heavily invested in partnerships. But our job is really to try to meet the needs of you, the congregations, wherever they are. And in the course of the working with individual congregations, we have developed regional cohorts, congregations that are in the same area: Central PA, Western PA, Greater Mississippi, the Carolinas, Ohio, Upper Midwest, and this Texas small congregations cohort is what we've just started this past year, Robert being the chair of this. And the purpose of the cohorts is to provide programming that a single congregation can't do on its own, or it would be difficult on its own, to deal with issues and then also to deal with programming. So we have, and we're going to talk about this with the committee after this meeting, is what kind of program do you want, educational, cultural, whatever, for your congregants. But for this cohort and for most of the others, everybody has recognized that security is a major issue. And that's why the first program of the Texas Small Congregation Cohort is dealing with this issue. And so we're delighted that you're all here. We are grateful, tremendously grateful to our speakers. And I'm going to turn it over to Robert to kick off the program.
Yeah, the reason I got on Jewish JCLP's board is because being in Victoria 40 years, I sometimes said that we were like the whooping cranes of Judaism. We felt like we were the last Jews standing. So I know what you guys that are on this call feel like, because we did that for a long time. And we were always reaching out for resources and honestly didn't get the help that I would have liked to have gotten. So I'm very excited at the fact that Noah leads our organization and we can provide some help. And this call is a great start. We have 3 really world-class speakers on security. I think you've had their resumes, so I'm only going to hit the highlights. Al Trimble joined the Secure Community Network in June of 2022 as a community security director for the Jewish Federation of Houston. So he is an ex-FBI supervisory special agent. He was there 27 years, and we were very fortunate in Houston that he joined us in 2022. And again, boy, was the time right to be able to beef up our security. So thank you, Al. Jason basically has the responsibility for security. And again, Jason, you'll talk about what you do, but he tends to be more in the smaller communities in several states. And again, he's also with the Secure Community Network, which they will talk about what that is. But that's an organization that the National Jewish Federation has supported and basically is put in place to help all of us. And so Jason is much more dealing with the smaller congregations, whereas Al is in Houston. Debbie, finally, and certainly great. Debbie is a lawyer by background. She's director of grant management, Security Community Network. I think, and be a lot of talk about this, that there are these $150,000 a year annual grants that are available from the government. I know they're going to talk about that. You know, how do you get it? Maybe you don't need it. What would you use it for? But Debbie's a wonderful resource. So when I look at the group that Noah's got here to talk, it's really first class. With that, I will turn it back over to, it looks like we're going to go threat assessment, and that is Jason, I think, to talk about what you see in terms of threat assessment.
Thank you. So we've got a slide deck ready to go between Al and I. So I'm just going to leave it up as we go through the agenda, because I put it together in a manner which should follow the agenda. And if we need to, you know, break left or right from that for a moment, that's fine. Little bit more background on me. I'm a Catholic.
Excuse me 1
kid.
second, Jason. Would everybody mute themselves other than the speakers? Thanks. Go ahead, Jason.
No problem. So I'm a Catholic kid that grew up on a 180-acre cattle ranch in Fresno, California. You know, come from a very mixed background family. I've got 5 older sisters. I'm the only boy in the family. And I've got 3 daughters. And my mom's from San Luis Potosi, Mexico. My dad's, you know, just a regular guy from Fresno, California. And I got into Jewish communal security after 21 and a half years and 8 deployments in the United States Marine Corps as an interrogator and 7 years of special agent time with NCIS. So if you've ever seen the TV program NCIS, just know that I've never seen it, never will see it, because I can't imagine that it's actually a good depiction of what agent life is like at NCIS. I'm sure Al would feel the same way about any show that involves the Bureau. So I got involved in Jewish communal security after I retired in 2015 in a very small Jewish community of Los Angeles, California. So I went from running, helping build and run the CSI program at the LA Federation, which takes care of about 2,500 square miles, about 750,000 Jews, to moving out to Texas, where I'm the regional director. So I take care of those communities that don't have a security director in Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Altogether, about 248,000 Jews in those 5 states. So it's really exciting for me, coming from a very dense population in LA to coming out and seeing some of the communities that I've seen out here in those 5 states that I've mentioned. Geographically, for those of you that are in Tyler and you haven't called me, talked to me, seen me, or reached out to me, I'm about 20 minutes from you. So if you need something, get a hold of me through the email, get a hold of me on my phone number, and I'll drive out and come see you whenever you need. So if everybody's all right with it, I'm going to go ahead and start the slide deck, and we're going to go right through it. Is that all right? Is that good, Robert? Wonderful. We'll teach you just a little bit about SCN as well, because not everybody knows who SCN is, and it won't take long, I promise. All right. So I can only see a few folks because I'm sharing my screen. Noah, can you see slides? Wonderful. Okay. All right. So here we go, folks. So our mission at Secure Community Network is to ensure the safety and security and resiliency of the Jewish community in North America. You've got 9 regional directors like me in the 9 FEMA regions. And then you've got security directors that work for SCN through local federations across North America, much like Al being there in Houston. So we do work along with the Jewish Federations in North America, the Conference of Presidents of major Jewish organizations, and many, many other Jewish communal partners throughout the United States. But that's our mission. Very quickly, the approach that we use, it's all professionally based, as you can see down there on the bottom. All of the employees of SCN security directors or regional directors on the field side have backgrounds from one of those organizations at the below. We've got about 125 professionals like us. 100% of us have tactical, operational, law enforcement, national security, and military experience. Collectively, it's about a little over 2,000 years of security experience between all of us. The agenda for today, we're going to talk a little bit right now. What we're doing is the programmatic review, very quick. Al and I are going to go through the threat assessment process, and then Debbie's going to hop in and do an amazing job about talking about the grant program, whether state or federal side, and how how to apply for, and some of the common pitfalls for NSGP applications. Then we'll talk a little bit about building security best practices, some emergency planning considerations, training programs that are available to everyone, and then some resources. And then once this is over, I'll send Noah the resources page that's full of hyperlinks that you can literally click on and go to those individual resources. So 30,000 foot of SCN programs. We run a 24/7, regardless of high holy days, federal holidays, or any other day off on the calendar program there based out of Chicago, where we have 20 intelligence analysts working around the clock to, alert the community, send out advisories, of which some of you probably receive, provide emergency and mass notification, intake of suspicious activity reporting, and then provide information back to our national law enforcement partners. The way I describe the analysis center or the duty desk is they're sitting on a digital park bench watching the circus so that they can identify problem clowns and then provide that information to law enforcement, who can then go and put their hands on those clowns and deal with them themselves. Of course, training, we do a ton of training. We're going to go into depth in that. And then we do a whole bunch of assessment stuff, and not just for NSGP reasoning, but really to focus on identifying vulnerabilities and mitigating those vulnerabilities. And we're going to talk more about training and assessment specifically here in just a second. The duty desk is very proactive. They focus on looking for threats towards our community. You'll see some of the threats that they've identified pop up on the screen as I talk here. They use a very proactive and some reactive methods, depending on what they're looking for, on deep and dark web and social media outlets. They do daily sweeps, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They provide those reports, as I mentioned, to law enforcement and government partners, who can then go out and put their hands on those folks. They track individual groups and individual points or persons of interest. And they do it based on the ideology and the threats towards our community at a given time. And as you can see there, that last one with the Islamic State of North America, pretty interesting. Here's a real quick look at this year's highest suspicious activity reporting from January to 19 August. And you can see bomb threats, explosive devices lead the way, shortly followed by property damage and vandalism, suspicious vehicles or persons, and then suspicious mail activity. So let's hop into the threat assessment. This is what the cover page of a typical assessment is going to look like. We do a very professional product because, again, it's going to either the state or the federal SAAs for your grant process. And we want to make those vulnerabilities as easy to identify and talk about the mitigation strategies in very clear language. Nothing against Debbie. Lawyer language is good, but not for assessments. So we utilize FEMA and DHS security best practices to assess your institution. And we start from the outside in, just as a threat would produce itself, right? From the outside of the institution, and we work our way in. These reports are between, for example, me as the assessor or the facilitator of that report and the leadership of that individual institution. These reports do not go to our CEO, Michael Masters. They don't go to the board of JFNA. They don't go anywhere outside of the train or outside of, the group that we're providing the assessment for. So I just want to make sure people understand we're not identifying vulnerabilities in your institution and then talking outside of school about it. That report is merely shared with your institution and your institution only. We provide a lot of low cost or no cost security measures. Security doesn't always come down to money, to be quite honest with you. And with almost 10 years in Jewish communal security, I can tell you prop doors are probably more prevalent in well-funded institutions than they are anywhere else. And I'll tell you that there's an Orthodox girls' school with about 500 girls in it in LA that has facial recognition systems, armed, uniformed, well-trained security practitioners. All of their exposed glass, all of it, not just the ground floor, but all of it is bullet and blast resistant. They have RFID, which is radio frequency ID, access control cards to get in and through parts of the building. So really, really well done, about a $2.2 million a year security program. And if I wanted to attack the Jewish community, I would attack that school and be very successful. Why? Because they prop open the kosher kitchen door in the alleyway so I can walk in, grab a knish, and start killing people. It cost us $0 to close that door, right? That's a zero cost. Some cost or low cost might be something like going to Home Depot and installing a $250 or a $500 security door with a screen with a deadbolt so that fresh air can come in and out, right? But bad people with bad intentions cannot. So that's just an example of low cost, no cost kind of measures that we talk about. That report, of course, can be used to apply for state or federal nonprofit grant programs. We've been successful over the almost 20 years of SCN's program to just last year receive or help Jewish communities receive $27.4 million. And that's just last year as an example of funds awarded through SCN, not only with the work that Debbie does, but the work that all of the security directors and regional security directors like myself do by going out and doing these assessments for those institutions. We provide construction reviews. It's important that if you're doing any kind of retrofits or any type of new construction, you're knocking a building down or you're getting rid of a parking lot and putting up a new building, that you involve us ahead of time so that security is part of the planning and architectural phases before you start building and not merely an afterthought when you do your walkthrough before you get your occupancy and go, oh my goodness, I think we created more of a problem doing this than we did solving something. So again, that's another service that we provide through that threat assessment process. Of course, we do review security and emergency plans with you all. We'll talk a little bit more about security and emergency plans later on in this portion of the briefing. And we do help through the request for proposal process when you're using your grant money and you're trying to make sure that you're doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons when it comes to upgrading some of your security apparatuses or target hardening your institution. We want to help you with some of the wording with that request for proposal so that the vendors understand what you're really in need of, and then do multiple RFPs for a particular thing. I always suggest a minimum of 3 if you can do it, and make those vendors work to get your business. Since January of this year, we've conducted nationally over 289 assessments that result in one of these reports being put out. And we've done over 400 walkthroughs, security walkthroughs of institutions with their leadership to help identify, problems along the way. Just locally in Region 6, we've already conducted 37 assessments this year and 22 security walkthroughs. Look, I've been doing this a long time, and although I'm not from the Jewish community, I've got a couple of very important Jewish mentors in my life. So I'm about as Jewish as a Catholic kid could be, I think. I don't want to create Folsom Prison for our community. That's not how our community works, operates, enjoys Jewish communal life. But I also cannot just have free-range chicken with people doing things in an open environment without any thought to, security, access control, and other things. So, SCN does not want to create a prison in your synagogue, but I also don't want you just aimlessly walking around unaware of threats to our community and how we can kind of mitigate those things. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Debbie. Debbie, do you need to run your own slides, or do you want me to just hold this here?
I'm just getting used to being introduced after a screen of chickens. I'm not sure I appreciate that, but all right, we'll see where I can go with that one. Yes, I would like to share my screen if you don't mind, but I'm not ready to do so yet.
Okay.
So next time, Jason, when I introduce you, I'll think of which animal I'm going to put up on the screen before we get.
Well, the animal had nothing to do with you or NSGP.
I know, I'm just kidding around. Anyway, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me today. I don't want to flip to my slides just yet. I want to give you a little bit of background and explain why the threat assessment that Jason talked about and that Al will discuss also, why is it so important? And what do I have to do with it? And what I'm going to tell you today is really just the icing on the cake, so to speak. It's a deeper subject than I could possibly discuss in the time that's allotted to me. However, the good news is that this is just to give you a brief overview so that you get an understanding of whether this is something that you want to pursue, or perhaps it's not the right time for your organization. And I'll give you enough information that you'll have the ability to make that decision. And if you decide that this will be something that you want to pursue this year, and when I say that you want to pursue, meaning that you want to go after a grant to try to obtain funds for your organization to secure implementation of some of the vulnerabilities that Jason spoke about in the assessment, then we can take next steps. And I'll talk to you on this call about some of the next steps that you can take and some of the resources. And that won't be the last time that you see me, because we do provide a lot of guidance along the road for organizations that are interested in applying for this grant, whether it be the federal or state grant. So this is not a one-all end-all. It's sort of the beginning to whet your appetite and give you the opportunity to make an educated decision about whether you want to pursue this or not. So having said that, the bulk of my discussion today is going to be about what we call the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, or the NSGP. You'll hear that acronym being thrown around a lot. And I know Jason mentioned a few that I want to talk about in a second. Why is the NSGP so important? It is very, very important and has been very vital to the Jewish community since inception in 2008, because it's the only federal program of its kind strictly aimed at nonprofit organizations. And what do I mean? It's not only House of Worship that are nonprofits, but also JCCs, social services agencies such as JCRCs, senior facilities, college campuses, if they are nonprofit. Some are, some aren't. Anyone that's a nonprofit 501c3 can apply. And these funds are critical because, as you know, being small organizations, all of these implementation options, such as putting in better lighting or putting in better doors or fencing, are quite expensive and can sometimes really tax your budget. So to be able to be eligible for these monies is extremely important. The caveat to that is, unfortunately, you're in the same shoes as many, many, many other organizations across the country. And while we've seen a great incline and a trajectory of more and more funds every year from its inception, just imagine that in 2008, the entire allocation for the whole country was 5 million. This year, it's 400 million. So, and even with 400 million, there's still not enough money in this allocation to satisfy the needs of everyone who applies. So it's an extremely competitive grant. And what I hope to be able to provide to you is the tools necessary to be able to submit the best possible application that you can. And so that makes your organization have one leg up on the others, because in a competitive process, although there's no guarantee of success, you want to make sure that you're doing everything exactly as it's instructed, because the stronger your application, the more likely that you'll succeed. So that's the type of guidance that I would like to provide to you. I won't go into detail, as I said today, into the nitty-gritty of how to apply and what you should write and how you should answer. But my answer to that is that coming up in the next few months, We will be conducting national webinars that are open to anyone who wants to join. You can go to our website now. I'll put it in the chat, and you can register for one or all of them. And the way that I structured these webinars is really to take you through the process. So there's a webinar that will go through a step-by-step process on how to apply, how to fill out the application. There's another section and another webinar that will talk about the threats, because FEMA is looking for what makes your organization at risk. That's the whole point of this grant, is they want to help organizations that are considered at risk. So when you write the application, you really want to explain clearly why you think your organization is at risk. And that's where the threats and risks section that we're going to speak about in the webinar come up. We also talk about all the nuances. For every year, there's some new guidelines. So take a look at that. Again, it's open to the public, and there's a wealth of information. There's also a wealth of information on our website, a lot of resources that we continuously update as they become available. So you'll get that. I don't want to spend any more time on that. What I'd like to do in the next couple of minutes that were allotted to me is I'm going to go very briefly through the slides, just as I said, to give you an appetite so that you can better understand whether this is something that might be appropriate for you for this year. One more little side note. The state of Texas is different than every other state in the country. And I'm talking specifically from a grants perspective. You might have other opinions on some other differences between Texas and everyone else, but the reason that I say they're different is that in one regard, they have a federal grant, which is we're going to talk about a bit, which that's the money that comes from Congress and is allotted to each state based on their decision, based on FEMA's decision about how much is at risk. But Texas also has a state grant that they've allocated money from their own budget, from the state of Texas budget, for this purpose. So you get really 2 tries at the apple. If you don't succeed with one, you can apply for the other. But the tricky part is you have to understand the deadlines and the submission requirements. And we're going to get into Texas's submission requirements, which are a little bit different than everywhere else. So let me switch. Let me see if I can share. And again, you'll forgive me. I'm going to go a little quicker on some of the more procedural ones, but a little slower on some of the others. So again, just give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Great. Okay. So let's forward through here. Okay. So here's what you would see if you went to our website right now. Here's our webinar series dates. You can see the topics. We really dive down into these subjects to give a very detailed and educated step-by-step description of what you need. So I give them, so it's hard for me to say how successful they are, but I can tell you that we get about 1,000 registrants, and I've gotten very good feedback on them. So I don't like to self-loud, so I'll just stop there. Okay, so here's what I want to give you sort of an idea of the timeline, just overview of what we're talking about here. This year is very, very different, and I'll explain why in a second. So in general, Congress develops this budget, and as with every budget, they hem and haw, and until they finalize it, there's a lot of politics that goes on. Then the president approves. And that's why over the course of the last number of years, the allocation has increased, because obviously the world is changing. There's a huge need and demand for more of these funding. After they approve the budget, approximately 60 days later, the notice of funding opportunity comes out. And the notice of funding opportunity is basically like the Bible of this grant process. That is written to for the states, each state. Those are the guidelines that the state must follow, not you as a nonprofit. The reason being is that this is a hierarchy. So as an organization, you don't apply for these monies directly to FEMA. You apply to the state of which your facility is located. So if I have a synagogue in New Jersey, I'm going to apply to the SAA, which is an acronym that Jason mentioned earlier. It stands for State Administrative Agency. So every state in the country has an office. They're called different things, but in general, it's like Office of Homeland Security for the state. They're the administrator of these grants. So you as an organization will never be dealing directly with FEMA. So when the notice of funding opportunity comes out, it'll give the guidelines for the states to then give their own guidelines for their nonprofits. So it's a 3-tiered level, if you could imagine that, with you, the nonprofits, being at the bottom. The middle is the SAA, the state, and then FEMA at the top. FEMA eventually does grade them and review them, but your direction will be only to the states. So it's extremely important, and I'll say this now and I'll say it again, for if you have any interest in applying for either the federal grant or the state grant, it is extremely important that you reach out to your state administrative agency. Get on their e-blast system, get to know who they are, and let them know that you're interested in applying for these grants. They are your best resource, better than any resource, better than a national webinar, better than reading anything. They are your best resource because they know exactly what is going to be required for that state, for Texas, and when it's going to be due. So I'll get to, so here is the State Administrative Agency. You can, I'll give you the email again to reach out to them. Just send them an email. Now, one of the reasons that I mentioned earlier that Texas is different is because Texas does require what they call pre-registration. So in other words, last year, Texas required that anybody that wanted to apply for the upcoming grant had to pre-register 3 months before. And if they didn't pre-register when the grant officially opened, they would be precluded from applying. But we don't have that deadline today because it was in January last year. But that only emphasizes the importance, if you want to apply, to speak with your SAA and find out when those deadlines are. And if they say, well, we don't know yet, then get those emails from them because you don't want to miss that deadline. So the reality is that if you were an organization that decided when the NSGP officially opened in last year, it opened in April, which was a bit late, but it usually opens around March. And you said, oh, gee, you know what? I really want to apply. I live in Texas. If you hadn't put in your pre-registration in January, you were not allowed. So your first step is to get on that email list. Okay, so some of the things I said, it's a competitive grant. Again, you're competing with thousands and thousands. I believe last year they had over 6,000 applicants and only about 2,800 or so were successful. One thing you should keep in mind that's very important when making the decision about whether you want to apply or not, they should understand from a fiscal navigation that the funds are rewarded on a reimbursement basis, meaning if you get this award, you will need to implement the project first, and then you can get reimbursement. So even though, as Robert mentioned earlier, you can apply for up to $150,000 in grant monies, you don't get a check in the mail for $150,000. You get the notice that you've been approved, and then there are procedural steps that have to be done. But from an implementation perspective, you need to actually complete the project, not all of them. You can do one at a time and then get reimbursed on a per project basis, but you cannot get an advance, and you certainly cannot get reimbursed for projects that you completed before you got the grant award. So these are the four elements of an NSGP grant. Jason and Al talked about the vulnerability assessment. It's very critical because anything that you want to apply for must be in the vulnerability assessment. So if your organization decides that the lighting at the front of your property needs to be replaced, if it's not in the assessment, then you can't apply for it. So those two, the red and the green, work hand in hand together. The vulnerability assessment and the investment justification, which is FEMA's way of saying application. We call it the IJ. If you hear that phrase, that's what we're talking about. They really support one another. The vulnerability actually supports the application. The mission statement, that's just a description of the who, what, and why you do what you do. And usually most synagogues have that as part of their, on their website. That's not that difficult to put together. And some states do require some supporting documentation. They may want to see a Form IRS, some other documentation, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. So those are really the elements of what an NSGP submission looks like. You can't write an application without the assessment. Here's from last year. Here's some of the points. Again, I'm just going to run this very quickly because this is something that if you decide that you want to proceed, then we'll deal with this on a much deeper dive than today. But just to give you an idea, as we said, you can apply for up to $150,000 per application. If you have more than one site, there's an opportunity to submit more than one application, but you need a separate assessment for each site. FEMA does separate between areas that are considered urban areas or areas of higher risk and other areas in the state. So if you are, usually most of the people from on this call, except for maybe Houston, which is an urban area, a lot of them will fall into the second funding stream or the NSGPS. It really makes no difference from a perspective of an applicant. It really doesn't make a difference. It's the same money, they just divide it up. So you don't have to worry about that now. You have to be at the site. So I get a lot of questions from organizations that are saying, well, we're doing renovation and we want to put in the wiring and cameras and we want to do all these things. It's going to be much cheaper for us to do it while we're under construction and the walls are open. But the answer is that unless you're actually inhabiting the site, it's not eligible. So in that case, what I recommend is people put in, in their plans or whatever it is, the foresight of where they would want to do things. And then once they are located and they're moved in, that would be the year for them to submit their application. Again, if you have any questions on this, if this is something that's relevant to your organization and you want to ask me further questions, by all means, you can follow up and we can talk about this offline. Just to give you some idea of some of the items that you can apply for are items that really harden the target. This is what this grant is all about. It's target hardening. They want things that are going to stay with the facility and do their jobs day in and day out. So if you put in impact resistant doors, that's going to be there as long as the building is built. Intrusion detection systems, gates, exterior lighting. So these are some of the main categories. This is not all inclusive. For example, last year they expanded this to include a generator. But it's not for the sake of when you lose power. A generator would be to support one of your security related equipment implementations. So for example, some organizations were successful in getting a generator because then their cameras wouldn't work. If a tornado or hurricane took out their took out their power, then their whole facility was very vulnerable. So they were able to ask for that. You can also ask, and this is kind of a topic that's very hard to cover on a peripheral basis, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. You can ask for contracted security personnel, training and planning. So we'll kind of leave training and planning aside because Jason and Al will talk a bit about that. But in terms of personnel, I know that hiring guards is a big ticket item for smaller organizations, and having a grant to pay or reimburse you for some of that is very, very helpful. So if that's something that you're thinking about doing, again, we can talk offline about what it will cover, what it won't cover, but keep in mind that you cannot do anything with this grant until you get the award. So if we're sitting here in August of 24 and you're thinking to yourself, well, gee, I really need money to pay for my security guards for Rosh Hashanah, this is not going to do that, because you cannot pay for your security guards on Rosh Hashanah when you haven't gotten the award yet. The awards don't come out for many months. So it has to be something after. So just don't make that mistake, because anything that is spent before you get the award is not eligible. So here's my recommendation. What should you do? What are the takeaways from today's brief meeting today? Schedule an assessment, which Jason and Al will talk to, and really register with your state. Very, very important. I cannot emphasize that enough. That will get you on the list to understand what the timeline is, and you won't miss deadlines. And also to get to know them, they'll be very helpful to you. Then once you've done that, you can start to get estimates for your planned projects, because you're going to have to build a budget for your application, and you can start drafting it well in advance of the deadline. Last year, Texas, they gave their very early pre-registration deadline, and they asked everyone to submit the application based on the prior year's form. And then when the new form came out, they just said, okay, now that you're pre-qualified, just fill out the new form. So you can draft it ahead of time. Also prepare your mission statement, very easy to do and helpful to have that in your file so that when deadlines come, you're not scrambling. It should be on letterhead, and then finalize your submission. So this is just a list of the whole myriad of, it's really not the whole, it's really just a partial list. But again, if the website is at the bottom of your screen, securecommunitynetwork.org/resources, DHS grant funds information. If you went there today or at any point, you will see that there is a whole host of resources. That's also where you find the webinar registration link. But it'll give you a quick start guide to the NSGP. It gives you tutorials. It has forms to fill out, a whole myriad of things that you can use to help support the navigation through this process. I'm just going to take a minute to talk about the state grant. The state grant, as generally speaking, as other state grants, they mirror themselves after the federal grant. So much of what I said today will apply to the state grant. The only difference is that their timeline is shorter, meaning the wait time between the time that you apply and the time that you get your award is much shorter with the state, because the monies come directly from the state, so they don't have to go through all the procedural hoo-ha that FEMA does. So that might be something you might want to take a look at. And again, when you reach out to your state administrative agent, they'll be able to give you the timeline as to when you should apply and what you need to apply. So before I say my goodbyes, I just want to tell you one thing that's going to kind of add a little bit of complexity. So this year, Normally there's just one federal grant and one state grant every year. But because there's been such a push from the legislators and from the public to put more money into this grant because of the fact, like I said earlier, that it's extremely competitive and very many organizations are not successful. There's been a push to get more money allocated. And FEMA is talking about having a second grant come out in a couple of months that will have that additional allocation. So there might actually be 2 grants this year, 2 federal grants this year. And we are going to be keeping on top of that and make sure that we let all of our organizations know what is going on, what is being allowed, what the timelines are. And hopefully things will not get too crazy and we'll be able to follow through. So takeaways from this, from my segment is reach out to your state administrative agent and take a look at, if you don't already have one, schedule an assessment and begin to prioritize what is it in your facility that would be eligible for this grant. And reach out, I'll put my email on the chat. Reach out to me if you have any questions whatsoever. I hope that if you have any questions now and we have time or at the end of this, I'm going to stay on till the end and I'm happy to address any questions before we finalize today. But I'm going to turn it over now back to Jason without any pictures of any chickens.
Debbie and Jason, is it possible that you can send me the PowerPoints and I can pass them on to the group?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I mean, I can send mine. I can't speak for Jason. Mine is fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get it over there. All right. And I'm sure there's going to be a few questions grant related, Debbie. So thank you so much for taking some time today and for sticking on. Al and I are going to talk a little bit about building security measures and trends real quick, things that we've seen after doing a lot of assessments and walkthroughs. Just to be clear real quick, those numbers that you saw earlier that I put out about a walkthrough or an assessment, sort of the same thing, but a bit different. An assessment, when we conduct an assessment, that's categorized statistically by the fact that we walked through an institution with leadership, identified key vulnerabilities, provided mitigation strategies through a formal report back to the leadership of that institution, right? Much different than Al or I just showing up at your institution to do a walkthrough with leadership or a security chair or somebody, identify some things or review the fact that you had some new doors put in to make sure that they meet the intent of providing the security best practices or the mitigation strategies that we talked about in the report. So one is a very formal thing where we're identifying stuff. It's in writing, it's in pictures, it's back to you to take some kind of action if you like. The other one is really a little bit business casual where we're walking through, talking with you, identifying some stuff that does not go into a formal report. So just want to be clear with that. Okay, so some building security measures and trends that Al and I have seen in years and years of doing walkthroughs and assessments in the community. All right. First thing, unprotected ground level glass. This is a big expense when you're talking about the mitigation strategies for this. So getting that bullet or blast resistant glass, the film installed on your ground level glass. It's probably one of the first things that you'll see in a report once we get through the perimeter and up to the building facade portion of the report is the fact that, you know, it doesn't have bullet or blast resistant glass. And you'll see that, you know, whether it's a small federation, whether it's a big federation, whether it's a small synagogue, big synagogue, Chabad, Hillel, it doesn't matter. It's across the community. And we talk a lot about it. And matter of fact, Al, if you've got a second, you've just recently done a lot of work getting the Houston Federation up to date on their glass, correct?
Correct. what I wanted to say about this assessment process, and Jason was pointed out that, you know, we do these walkthroughs and they're informal. Just because it's informal doesn't mean it is just as important as that TVRA, because we want you to mitigate what you can when you can without that NSGP money that Debbie has talked about. We hope that is going to come down the pike, but one of the things that we've done just with the Federation building in Houston is we've taken care of the exterior glass with ballistic film. And what that ballistic film can do is slow down a firearm round from a handgun. The number one cause of preventable death is bleeding. A projectile coming through that glass at 2,600 feet per second is going to cause blood loss. So we want to film the exterior glass. So that's one of the things that the NSGP funds that Debbie talked about can help do. The Federation building, we just did $22,000 worth of ballistic film applied to the exterior windows. What we're finding in a lot of our facility walkthroughs and assessments is that not only is there exterior glass, but interior speaking, there's lots of glass on the interior. So those are things that you want to mitigate with this film. One of my colleagues told me the perception of the environment dictates criminal behavior. So as you're approaching this glass and you can see in, and there's no signs, Jason talked about low cost, no cost, no trespassing, you're under surveillance. All of these things are signage that you could have on your facility, which is a low cost deal. And that's all goes into your TVRA. So unprotected glass, number one, we want people approaching our facilities to say, wow, I see signage, which is going to tell me what I can do and what I can't do. And if this glass is not easily broken, we've seen people walk up to the synagogue, throw a brick through the glass on their first attempt, and it penetrates. You film that, the brick is not going to get through that glass. It's going to take several attempts, and you still might not get through.
Thank you, Al. And look, I'm not trying to convince anybody that, you know, Hamas or Hezbollah is going to park an explosive vehicle next to your synagogue. Although, you know, things like that have happened in the United States in the past, whether it's a neo-Nazi, white supremacist organization or otherwise. But also think about this in the fact of storms that come through your area, right? Flying debris or electricity transformers that explode and create a shock wave that may shatter that glass. What we're asking to do by protecting that glass will prevent those shards of glass from flying through your institution and injuring folks. That's one of the top ones. Either no or damaged perimeter fencing and vehicle gates. As you can see here in the photo that I have up, there's no well-defined perimeter to keep unvetted access from vehicles or pedestrians or other away from the institution that's there. As you can see in this photo here, we've allowed nature to sort of degrade the perimeter fencing that they had there and almost make it totally inoperable. So, you know, preventing things from outside of our protective envelope from getting onto our campus through either not having or having damaged perimeter fencing and or vehicle gates. Those access controls are imperative. A lack of vehicle ramming protection, as we saw coming from Europe several years ago now. You know, the idea of utilizing a vehicle, you know, a $19 or $20 U-Haul rental to run over congregants and families and people out in front on the way to or on the way home from services is one of those things. And so having some vehicle ramming protection, whether that's through walking areas on your campus and totally separating unvetted access control by vehicles versus vetted access control in vehicles and where those things can go, but protecting our physical structures and our people from the ability to have a vehicle, you know, approach them and ram them. And then of course, excessive foliage. Not only is this a fire and safety kind of hazard issue, but when it comes to the security side, if the photo that's up here, if I'm in my synagogue and I'm looking out towards the road and this is what I see, I can't see bad things approaching me, number one, right? Nor can my camera's system see bad things approaching me, or our security lighting, right? It impacts our security lighting. So taking care of excessive foliage for the fire hazard part of it, or for ensuring that our security systems are able to do their job is really important. Al, did you have anything to add to those?
I wanted to add, some folks may think that these anti-vehicle ramming devices are ugly, but I just want to say that some of these bollards that you can install, they're good looking. Some of them have actual lighting. Some of them are decorative. Some of them are planters that have plants that can go inside, and some of them weigh 1,600 pounds. So when you're considering trying to protect the entrance to a building or protect a big plate glass window, consider a decorative bollard. And all of those things, once again, are covered by NSGP. So just remember, I remember the old hitching posts back in the day where you just tie old paint to it in the Wild Wild West. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of like a bollard. But these concrete bollards are really safe, and some of them are decorative, and they do the job.
And you can also, when it comes to bollards, and as Al mentioned, it doesn't have to be a bollard. It could be planters, boulders, decorative, items in front of those windows or those walking areas. But when it comes to bollards specifically, they also have bollards that you can either raise or drop down depending on the environment and that you need it available for protection. So, you can have it up during just large high holy day kind of events when you're having more traffic, and have it down when you don't, and you're utilizing security services to provide that outer protection for you. So thank you for that, Al. Couple more. We have unlockable or non-locking interior doors. This set of doors actually is a set of doors, the photo being taken from inside the synagogue, inside the sanctuary, out towards a vestibule area. The ability for us to quickly and effectively lock down in an emergency when we have a mass of people that are vulnerable is imperative. And when it comes to synagogue doors, sanctuary doors, classroom doors, those things, having easily usable interior locks is better than having the old double key deadbolt, where you need to go find the key in order to put it on in the inside, lock the door, or from the outside. So very easy to use locks installed on interior doors is what we're looking for to provide that safety and security for active threats coming onto your campus, and us locking down lots of folks at one time. Double doors present another problem that when it comes to locking them, a single door that is touching a well-defined door frame all the way around, you have a locking device and hinges, and that is what secures it to the door frame. Double doors present a different problem because you get that ability to pry it potentially, or use a fulcrum kind of device to be able to attack the fact that it's a double door. So ensuring that you have double doors that are actually lockable from the interior is very important as well. Damaged security devices, as you see here in this photo, or in this photo here, it's all over the community, and it's pretty inexpensive to fix and or replace. And Al, I think you've just recently done some assessments. Do you have anything to add to those?
I would just say that these pictures that we're showing you today and sharing, this is absolutely indicative of what we're finding in real time. The large door that doesn't secure, you've got a room that 400 people can fit in, and there's absolutely no way to secure that door in the event that you had to. So basically, I think people are looking with the threats that we're seeing abroad, and historically we're seeing the aggression of Hamas, the aggression of Israel in retaliation. That sort of anti-Semitism finds its way to the States, finds its way to our Chabad synagogues. And you've got situations like this when you've got a door or a handle that is typically very easily can be fixed or remedied. These assessments, these walkthroughs are certainly not things aberration. It's very, very common is what I would add to this.
Thank you, sir. Again, damaged security cameras or other devices. This is a real photo of, you know, an institution having DHS cameras from a year's previous grant cycle that are just non-operational. And so getting to the crux of the matter, if we can't see bad things approaching us and give ourselves an opportunity to react, then we're not doing ourselves or our institution congregants or parents or students any justice. And so ensuring that we stay on top of those, whether damaged security devices or damaged security electronic devices, is imperative. And then, of course, this is a really touchy one for me. Again, as I told everybody, I'm not Jewish, but I'm about as Jewish as a Catholic kid can be in Jewish communal security for almost 10 years. Unlocked or unprotected ARCs and Torahs. You know, unfortunately, I've seen things happen to Torahs that you just don't want to have seen. I know most of us have them insured, and if you don't, please make sure your Torahs are insured. And I don't mean to sound callous about this either, but a lot easier to live through the theft of a Torah than the Torah being rolled out and desecrated on your synagogue floor and posted on social media for everyone to see. Just something I don't want any synagogue to ever have to face. And you can do it in pretty simple ways, whether it's an electronic IDS system, intrusion detection system, where motion sensors are paying attention to the ARC area when we're not in the building, or whether it's physical, combination lock and key type locks that actually prevent access into the Torah or into the ARC and being able to get your hands on the Torah as long as it's after hours. I do understand there's considerations for electronics and electronic devices for some of our synagogues, but there are ways to protect our Torahs and our ARCs, and we just need to take a proactive approach to doing so. Anything to add to those two, Al?
Jason, I would just say once again, when we start talking about the ARC, we've just seen this sort of vandalism occur right here in the Houston area, where someone broke a window that could have been filmed with a tree limb that they found outside, gained access, went right inside, removed the Torah from the ARC, was drinking an alcoholic beverage, spilled some of the beverage on the ARC. The threat didn't come from outside of the Jewish community. This individual was Jewish and did this. So it just underscores that, yes, we really need to take a thought of protecting these sacred artifacts inside our synagogues.
Thank you very much. So we'll talk a little bit about planning now, kind of some high points. First of all, do you have an emergency plan? I've been lucky enough to have left a very densely populated community in LA to get out to some very, very interesting and small communities, whether it's out in Beaumont, Texas, Little Rock, Arkansas, Oklahoma City, New Mexico, just some much smaller communities. Some have plans that are in amazing 3-ring binders and have about an inch of dust on them because they're never reviewed, they're never double checked. And actually, Jason, I only use it to keep my executive director's door open so that we don't have to get up and down and close and open the door all the time. First, do you have a plan? If you do, are you exercising that plan and walking through that plan to identify some key hazards along the way? Because as our communities grow and our building facilities change in the way that we use them, plans also have to change. So do you include a lockdown? Do you include evacuation? Do you include reunification? And when it comes to lockdowns, I'll be very frank, do not use code words. So Mr. Smith has left the building over a loudspeaker or code blue, code red, code green, code black. Shabbat is canceled. None of those give visitors to the institution that are not part of your emergency plan an opportunity to survive. And in order to get people an opportunity to survive, We just need to use plain language. So lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. It goes straight into my amygdala, even if I'm engaged, in a very personal conversation with Noah and something's going on, that goes straight to my amygdala, and there's no question about what I'm supposed to do, which is lock down. And it's been very proven, right? That's why we have 911. That's why we have stop, drop, roll, because we know that's what it takes to get into people's heads. So double check your emergency plans. Does your plan outline the roles that your staff is supposed to exercise during an emergency? If it doesn't, it should. And now it doesn't have to be so detailed as, my administrative assistant takes 15 steps and closes this door and 20 steps and closes that door, but it does need to have the key roles and what they're supposed to do in an emergency in it. Do you have prepared press releases and other emergency mass notifications ahead of an incident or an emergency occurring? And I'll tell you why it's so important. I don't want to have to craft a message from the ground up under duress and emotion and in the time of an incident. I want to have some forethought and think ahead and have a draft or a boilerplate ready to go so that at a moment's notice, I'm only having to think about the 2 or 3 blanks of where I need to fill information in so that we can very quickly and accurately get that information out to whomever needs it. So having some boilerplates, whether it's press releases or whether it's internal communications to students, staff, congregants, that kind of stuff, ready to go so that we can use it when the time comes if we need it. Have you checked your emergency equipment that's in your facility? So whether we're talking about fire extinguishers, AEDs, stop the bleed kits, unfortunately for some congregations, it's become a necessity or a school to have Narcan on hand and other things. So all of those emergency plan and emergency apparatuses, have we checked them to make sure that they're not expired, out of date, or that they're actually still usable? So all part of ensuring that you have an emergency plan and facilitating some exercise to it to make sure that it actually works. And have you invested in a relationship with your local law enforcement or fire departments? I can tell you, coming from the law enforcement side, having a pre-existing relationship with an organization or a group of people that did not begin the moment an incident happened was very beneficial. I can tell you also from my time in LA, very successful, the communities that had a pre-existing relationship, that when something did happen near their institution, law enforcement was already thinking, okay, that's close to, Temple XYZ. I need to get a hold of the rabbi real quick and make sure everything's okay, that they know they need to lock down, or that, they know that they need to adjust their schedule for pickup or drop off at the school. So investing in those relationships, it doesn't cost us a lot, and it can pay off massive dividends. The way I always suggest it is, most of our institutions have an area where a law enforcement officer could come in and sit down, use the Wi-Fi, use the bathroom, grab a cup of coffee while they're doing a couple of reports during the day. Couple of benefits. Obviously, a law enforcement officer utilizing our facility benefits them, right? It also benefits us because we get a marked car parked out in front of our synagogue or day school or JCC, and a uniformed armed law enforcement professional who's trained as well to be there on the property, and it really doesn't cost us much. So definitely would ask everybody, as part of your emergency plan and your operations, to think about, how is my relationship currently with law enforcement and how is it with the fire department? Al, anything to add to some of the planning?
I was going to say, and if you find that you have no relationship, that's okay. Find out who your constable is, find out who your sheriff is, or how far their substation is from your facility, and establish that. What I keep hearing over and over from law enforcement is the time to establish a rapport is not during a crisis. That's the key. So far as your emergency plans go, If you don't have an emergency plan, that's okay. Understand, you've got to start from square one. You've got to start somewhere. And if you're going to start with, well, how many doors does it take to get out of this facility? Do we have fire extinguishers? Where are they? And build upon it. You don't have to have a comprehensive plan right out of the box. Build on it. And so work on it. And then the other part I would add is that if you have a plan, or if you're getting a plan together, practice that plan. Can you get out of the building? Where are you going when you get out of the building? Maybe it's 30 degrees outside when you're evacuating. Where are you going to go? Are you going to a vehicle? Are you going to another location? For the Federation in Houston, we've got it set up where we can leave that building. It's terribly hot outside. We can't be outside for a protracted period of time. We know that we can walk a mile, less than a mile, and be at another synagogue that will take us in. So practice your plan. If you have no plan, just start on it, just on a small one, and you don't have to have a big comprehensive.
And we can also provide you a link to help you get started with an emergency or a security plan as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, so we'll stay on track here with our timeline. At least I'm paying attention to the agenda here to make sure we're staying within due bounds. Let's get into a little bit of training. So when it comes to Secure Community Network and the training that we provide, we like to do most of it in person. There's a lot more retention and learning that occurs in person than does over Zoom. And I know that's kind of counterintuitive for what we're doing right now, but this isn't a specific training course. So one of the big trainings that we do is Countering Active Threat. It's a very comprehensive training program. I've put some learning objectives up there directly out of our curricula. And Al, I think you just did one of these recently, right?
Just did a CAT training for a bunch of individuals. Actually, we had a training for students. We're trying to make this inclusive because adults face anti-Semitism, but students are facing anti-Semitism in the classroom, on the campus. So yes, we just did a CAT training. And basically what's great about this training, it specifically identifies the Jewish community and the threats that are indicative of the focus of what's happening around the world. And we talk about the type of threat, how to mitigate that threat, and what factors kind of prohibit us from being able to understand what that threat is and where it's coming from. So it's a great program for understanding how to mitigate and what factors prevent us from understanding what is actually happening to us. So Countering Active Threat training is great. Had a bunch of teachers just participate in the training last Thursday. So Countering Active Threat, along with the others, education. They say, well, why are we talking about training? It gives us a better response, a better reaction, a quicker reaction time to a real-time threat. That's why we harp on education and training.
Absolutely. We also offer Stop the Bleed training. You don't have to specifically have a Stop the Bleed kit there at your institution to receive the training. And if you don't have Stop the Bleed kits, I'd ask that you email me separately or email Al so that we can help you figure out a way how to get Stop the Bleed kits. But as Al mentioned, when we were talking about some of the building security issues with the glass, massive bleeding is definitely one of the biggest things that we see in our community or affect our community in a negative light. And being able to stop the bleed, understanding what you need to do before the incident presents itself is much better than trying to work your way through it when you're experiencing it. So Stop the Bleed, it's an amazing program. I just did it out in Oklahoma City, and I think we had like 50 communal congregations out there at one synagogue. So it was great. And when it comes to Stop the Bleed, there's a little bit of practical application when we're talking about the tourniquets and combat gauze and things like that. But I can also tell you, in all of our training curriculum, there is nothing where we're going to try to gross you out or make you feel triggered, that kind of stuff. Everything's pretty clinical and everything's pretty matter of fact, but there's nothing out there that's going to we're not in the business of trying to scare you into training. So anyway, stop the bleed. It's imperative. Guardians training is where we would come out and train your lay leaders or your volunteers, your ushers and greeters to learn skill sets that help you identify, protect, and respond to all hazards. I talk about it simply this way. Maybe the Reader's Digest version, if I'm dating myself a little bit here, is basic situational awareness, right? What am I seeing? And I'll pick on New York a little bit here. And I'm sorry for anybody that's from New York, but you'll see something, say something, right? To Al and I, as practitioners in the security realm or in law enforcement, see something, say something means something different to us. It gets a bit nebulous to some folks. Well, what do you mean see something? What am I supposed to see? How is it going to present itself, right? What's it going to look like, smell like, sound like, taste like? And then say something. Well, to whom? Who am I supposed to say something to? The security chair, the cantor, the rabbi, or do I call 911? And then also, when you talk about say something, how do I articulate it, right? I'll tell you honestly, I received plenty of phone calls when I was in LA that kind of sounded a little bit like this. Hey, Jason, if you got some time, could you call LAPD? We've got a guy standing on the bima telling us that he's the Messiah. Okay. Sounds fairly docile, right? Then when I start asking questions, no, there's a bit more to it, right? It's a naked man holding a 27-inch machete in the middle of, an Orthodox congregation as they're trying to daven. So two total different things. So if you just stick to see something, say something, the say something that I received is significantly different than the say something that I would put out to law enforcement. So again, pre-incident indicators and being able to have some basic situational awareness for Guardian. Be aware. Al, do you want to talk a little bit about Be Aware?
Yeah, Be Aware is a great program for anybody that wants to increase their situational awareness. And it's not just about inside the synagogue. It's anywhere you go, whether it's inside a restaurant, a movie theater, on vacation. This training kind of gives us a stance where, well, what is it? It defines it. What is situational awareness? And how does my particular bias prevent me from being situational aware? And people might hear that word bias and say, whoa, that's negative. But, there's nothing wrong with bias. It's how we treat people because of it. The last thing anybody wants to be is accused of racial profiling. But if you talk about what you see or who you see, and then you talk about the behavior of what is coupled with that individual, you're on hallowed ground. And that's what Be Aware is all about, is being able to identify and couple what you're seeing with what is actually transpiring and believing what you see. And so Be Aware takes you through all the components, whether it's in education, whether it's geographics, things that might keep you from understanding what's going on. But it's an excellent training program for anybody, synagogue leaders, synagogue clergy, congregants, anybody, to increase your awareness. And it talks about awareness levels. I know you've heard people talk about, well, he's tuned out or she's tuned out. And it's like, well, we've all been there, but do we stay there? And how do we get out of that? So Be Aware touches upon that. And it's all about situational awareness and preparing us to give a better dissertation to law enforcement or to somebody else about what we see. And it's not always the threat. God forbid somebody have a medical emergency and we can articulate to somebody, well, this is how you get to my particular building or the interior room inside the building. So directional orientation, situational awareness as it pertains to directional analysis as well is part of this Be Aware. It's a very good program for anyone.
Yeah, and to me, Be Aware is more of the advanced situational awareness to the Guardian's basic situational awareness. Yeah. De-escalation training, de-escalation, I think, again, dating myself a little bit law enforcement wise, this was something that we used to call verbal judo years and years and years ago. But it's necessary, especially for those ushers and greeters, lay leaders that are vetting or interacting with folks as they're coming into, sort of the heart of our institution or building. But yeah, de-escalation training, definitely equips people with knowledge, skills, techniques to diffuse or reduce tension or hostilities. I don't think there's any shortage of mental health consumers that happen to just so happen live near synagogues and day schools and JCCs these days. But de-escalation training is definitely one of those I would highly suggest. All of these trainings also can be provided to your professional guard services or volunteer services that are working at your institution. I created a course years ago when I was in LA to address one of the big problems I think that we have of a lot of professional guard services that provide those services to our community are not from our community. So how can I, on one hand, ask them to identify abnormal behavior or pre-incident indicators that would be weird in the Jewish community if they don't already know what's normal in the Jewish community, right? So those cultural competencies is one of those things that we need to be able to get across to folks who are not normally part of our community, but do provide services to our community through, professional guard services. So all of these can be provided to your professional guard services as well. Tabletop exercises, I put this in training, although it also does touch the emergency operations or security planning kind of side. But this is something that we can help provide once you have an emergency operations plan, once you have a security plan written and ready to go, then we can come out and do a couple of tabletop exercises with your staff out there to ensure that everything works as though it's supposed to. So, validate those organizational plans, identify any gaps in those plans and procedures, and then help you put some processes in there to mitigate those from happening again. So tabletop exercises, I think, are one of the things that don't happen often, and they really need to, probably once a year. Okay, so some resources. I think we might be just a little ahead of schedule now, but some resources that are available. Again, don't worry about snapping photos of these things and that kind of stuff. I'm going to get these over to Noah after the event so that you can just utilize the hyperlinks. But we've got a community guide for working with law enforcement and a law enforcement guide to Judaism. Again, those two specifically, I think giving those cultural competencies to those professional guard service providers that are not part of our community. It kind of it's Judaism 101 really for law enforcement and security is the way I put it. We've got a High Holy Day security planning checklist. I mean, you can read the slide. There's a ton of things that we have available to you, whether it's swatting, bomb threat guidance, the power of hello, those kind of things. So all of this will be hyperlinkable for you when you receive it from Noah. If you're looking for other things, you can always go to the Secure Community Network website and click on resources. I know reported incident is the one highlighted in red here, but it's highlighted for a reason to draw people's attention when they first come to the website. But under the resources tab, which hopefully you can see here with my cursor, you can go to the resources tab, and then over on the right-hand side, you can click a bunch of different resources and related links there as well for you. Some additional resources you'll get from Noah and I and Al after this is the suspicious mail packages, unattended items, communicated threats checklist, report campus hate is another big one, civil unrest and preparedness is another big one, and emergency management basics for Jewish leaders as well. Then, of course, on the deeper side, we've got some cybersecurity prevention and mitigation, firearms and the faithful, because I know that's always a question when I go out to some of these smaller communities, how to form a security committee, and then low cost, no cost guide that we have for security measures. Other resources that we have available, I'll put a couple up on the screen, but we have a whole host of one-pagers, top 10s, and other reference guides and materials. So civil unrest, as I talked about, is one of them. As we're getting through this election cycle that's slowly creeping up onto us. The opportunity for protests to turn into civil unrest unfortunately exists. And so preparing your institution as part of your emergency operations plan and being ready for civil unrest, I think, is important, especially for those areas that are in larger cities. And then we have things like, the top 10 list for your facility. And we also have, outdoor service events. This is just a couple of examples of all of those links that'll be provided to you. Please stay connected to us. So register for our daily update newsletter at securecommunitynetwork.org. Feel free to follow us on any of the social media. I've put Debbie and Al and I's email up here. And again, if you would like to, Noah, if you'd like me to have that as part of the resource stuff that I send to you, happy to do that. I will also include my cell phone number for those communities that are not connected to a federation security program, so that you can reach out to me. And please feel free to do so. As long as I'm not engaged in a meeting when you call, I'll answer the phone and be available to you 24/7. So with that, I think, Noah, that's the majority of our presentation. Happy to open up some questions. I'm sure everybody is waiting to ambush Debbie right now.
Robert?
Yeah. Al, Jason, and Debbie, great job. Tons of information. I'm sure people have some questions. And I will just open it up for people to be able to hit your unmute button and direct a question.
I have, Harry, did you raise your hand? Okay, unmute yourself.
No, I didn't. I don't have a question.
Okay.
I do have a question, actually two. First of all, this is just really amazing how comprehensive this introduction is, but I'm concerned that it can be overwhelming, and if it's overwhelming, it leads to paralysis and inaction. And so many of the all of the congregations on the Zoom are small congregations with no staff. Sometimes it's just the lay people dealing with it. How can they? What advice do you have for us as a collective, or for synagogue individually, to embark on this process? The second thing is, and I emailed Debbie. Debbie and I were back and forth. I know from some other congregations that I've worked with elsewhere in the country, to go through the grant process is really, really difficult. And the question is, are there people around that you can hire to help write the grant, manage that process? And if so, what Robert and I will do is we'll look for Jewish foundations in Texas who may want to provide grants for that. And then Debbie had mentioned that some of that could actually be reimbursed through the grant process, the national process itself.
Only the implementation side, not the
Okay,
writing side.
okay.
Only the implementation.
All
side.
right. So we can look at it that, but the more important question is, how do you deal with the paralysis that this can help come up with?
Yeah, so look, I think I'll take that first question if you don't mind, Al, because it's near and dear to my heart. I couldn't tell you the amount of Chabad's or Reform, Conservative, or other synagogues that I went to, even in California. Maybe it was in a strip mall, maybe it was a small home that they were only open for davening or high holy days, and are struggling with that security program paralysis that you mentioned, Noah. The first way to work through it is just to start taking steps, right? So security is this big problematic elephant. I'm not asking you to eat the whole thing for dinner tonight. Let's just collectively start taking small bites out of it over time, so that way on the longitudinal side of it, right, in a year, 2 years, 3 years, we've at least taken some action to get 50% of the stuff handled. Whereas if we just didn't start eating, you know, it's just going to sit there on the plate, right? So the long and the short of it is this. If you're one of those communities that doesn't have a Federation security director, let's call me, let's set up a Zoom, and let's start hearing from you, because it's not about what's important to me. It's what's important to your institution, your lay leaders, your board, and your congregants, right? So I make the recommendations all the time. You got to have a perimeter fence. Well, Jason, the perimeter fence ain't what our congregants are going to be okay with. Okay. So if you're telling me that's off the table, no problem, right? It's like security is like an onion. So let's take that layer off. Let's peel that one back, get rid of it. Now we're up to the building facade, okay? As Debbie very well mentioned with the grants, we need to do some structural hardening, right? Whether it's through access controls, glass, or just training our ushers and greeters to be able to identify those pre-incident indicators or those behaviors that are indicative of causing, you know, life-threatening injuries, so that we can then institute our emergency action plan. I see a problem, right? Person getting out of vehicle, not dressed appropriately, you know, because it's 110 outside. Who wears a trench coat? Why do you go to his trunk first? Let's lock the doors, right? And get everybody behind. We'll talk to them through, you know, through the Ring doorbell or whatever it is. So the short of it is, get on the phone with me. Let me hear about what's important to you, and I'll help you through that process.
That's great. And Al, that would be the same for those in the Houston area.
That would be, and what I want to say, I wanted to address that part about the paralysis, because a lot of folks talk about, I don't have the bandwidth, I don't have the knowledge of how do I apply, where do I apply, what do I have to do first to even be eligible. And I just want to relate a story real quick. Congregation in Houston, they're applying for the second year. The first year, they did not get the grant. Second year, they have a grant writer who is helping them. Grant writer bails in the process. President of the synagogue contacts me and says, my gosh, she's in tears saying that we don't have any hope. We have a great assessment here. And I want to say, I'm not trying to toot my horn. I'm going to toot Debbie's for her, but we did 3 out of 5 assessments in 22, we as SCN, and 3 of the 5 got the grant. In 23, 6 of 8 got the grant, all of whom had the involvement and expertise of Debbie behind them. The synagogue that had their grant writer bail and the folks that were putting it together had no clue where to go. I said, look, don't give up yet. I called Debbie. She's an excellent resource. As Jason said, you pick up the phone. Well, who do you call? Well, you can call me, you can call Jason, you can call Debbie, and we'll point you in the right direction, because it is a crazy process trying to get this grant, trying to apply online for it, understanding that some factions of Adobe are not compatible with what you're trying to do, but you've got people that can talk through it. The other thing is, in Houston, what I found was that if you got the grant, people are holding it like this. This is my grant, you know, and I've got all the knowledge of how to apply, and they're not sharing it because no one's asking them, and no one's really finding out that, yes, this synagogue got it for 3 years in a row. And I'm at the point now where I know synagogues that have received it 3 years in a row, and they're saying, hey, call me, and I can walk them through this. So just to echo what Jason says, yeah, pick up the phone, and resources like Debbie to assist. I can't put a price tag on that. It's amazing.
Thank you. David Blumberg.
Well, before we go to David, can I just say a couple of things about it's important with regard to grant writers. Like everything else, you have to be a sophisticated buyer when it comes to grant writers. Just like everything else that you're buying, they run anywhere from, you know, very modest cost to very expensive. And the trouble is that some of the more modest fees, and I'm not saying that you can't get someone good, but unfortunately you miss out on a lot because you don't know how good they are or how they're going to work for your organization. Because as I said from the outset, the key to making your grant spotlight is to have it in your words. And so if you use a grant writer that's sort of a cookie cutter grant writer, and some of the more affordable ones, you know, are cookie cutter grant writers, you risk the being one of a cookie cutter. And so I would say that before you jump to a grant writer, see if you can. I know it's a lot of work, but as Al and Jason said, we are offering a lot of resources. I sent Noah just now a checklist of things to get you started with links that you can go to, familiarize yourself, sign up for a webinar. And then once you get familiar with that, then reach out to us because we can help carry you along the way. But it really does make a difference when an organization themselves is involved in the writing of the grant, because then it speaks with your own words about your own facility, and nobody can speak about your facility and the risks that you are encountering better than you. If you encounter and you engage a grant writer that's 600 miles away or 1,000 or whatever, they're not going to be able to write as well. If you do engage with a grant writer, make sure that you have a lot of involvement in what they're writing, and make sure that you read the final grant before they submit. There have been a lot of issues with grant writers being very careless and submitting grants for organizations with the wrong name. And you don't want to be one of those organizations that loses points or gets kicked out because it's clear that you did not write that application. FEMA really pays very special attention and is very clear about the fact that they want it in your own words, and they will kick it out. And you won't know that because you don't get a list that says you've been declared ineligible because of A, B, C, D. So, again, not anything I respect. I work with many grant writers, but these are some of the pitfalls and things that you should be looking for. So try to educate yourself initially. I know it's a lot of information, but there are many things that can get you up to speed. And then if you're still wanting to go in that way, as I said earlier to Noah, the grant will not reimburse you for grant writers because it's a pre-award cost. You can ask on your application for some help with grant administration, because there is a load to lift on once you get the award. As you can imagine, it's a federal grant, so there's procedural things to get reimbursed. You can ask for up to 5% of your grant award for that. But if you want a grant writer, I would say please reach out to me ahead of time, and we can have that discussion about what to look for, what questions to ask, so you can do your due diligence before you sign on the dotted line.
Perfect, thank you. Now David, then Peggy.
Oh, we've gotten the grant. Now we're spending the money, and we've had some problems communicating. Are you also available for helping us through the process of spending the money?
So sure, I can, it depends what you mean by helping you through the process. I'm certainly able to try to troubleshoot and answer any questions that you have and try to help you with your SAA. I'm not exactly sure where you're at, but again, please reach out to me offline, and I will we'll have this discussion a little further, and I'll do the best I can to try to navigate you through the process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Peggy.
Al, are you the one in Houston? I'm not sure I have your names correct.
Yes, I'm in Houston.
I want to know how. I have 3 questions, but one is for you, Al. How soon can you get to Galveston to help us and give us an assessment?
Okay, I want to make sure Galveston, I thought Galveston had one. And if I'm wrong, that's okay. How soon? I'm sure we could work it out that I could be there in September or early October.
Okay.
But you need to email me what you need, where you are, name and address of the synagogue. Is it Congregation Beth Jacob?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I'm not sure if that's in the Federation's territory, but even if it isn't, myself or Jason will be able to assist you. I would have come last year because I got that ask, but I had like 10 requests in January and I couldn't make it to Galveston, but I've only had 4 and it's not even September yet. So if you email me, I probably can make it down there in September or October.
Perfect.
That question number 1, what's 2?
No, but the other one, well, somebody else was trying to ask a question.
Yeah, real quick, Peggy, hold on.
Yes,
So
yes.
what Al just kind of touched on is one of my biggest pet peeves for our community. And I'm not trying to be rude to anybody, please. But if you want help, you got to allow us to help you. And I cannot help you if you wait until 10 days before the expiration date in order to try to schedule an assessment, right? So I highly doubt anybody on here waits until the morning of Passover to get ready for Passover. Don't wait until the morning of the grant requirement to ask me to come out and do an assessment, right?
That's why I'm jumping on now.
Get them now, get them scheduled.
Yes, yes. Then the other thing is, Noah, I want to know, I know you're recording this. I've tried to take notes all along, but will we get your recording?
The recording and the PowerPoints, Debbie already sent her PowerPoint. We'll get Jason's and that'll all go out.
All right, my third question is, and you're always so good. Oh, God bless you. God bless you. Noah, when Noah says, sign on, we sign on. But the other thing is, Steve Feldman, I want to know if Steve has any question. He's our undercover, when he's at the synagogue, he's undercover security, and he's a retired fireman, very high up. And I'm wondering if Steve has any questions that would help Beth Jacob. Steve, are you still on? No, are you seeing Steve anywhere?
I think he's muted, but he hasn't unmuted. But you know what? If he does have anything, he'll send the questions and we'll pass it on to Jason. So
Okay, very good. And thank you while I'm on, just everybody, thank you so much. This has been so informative. I'm so excited to get started on everything. I felt we were in good shape until I started hearing what good shape really is. So thank you, everybody.
Joan, thank you, Peggy. Joan, unmute.
Yes, I wanted to thank all of you for sharing today. It has been very informative. My question is, we did apply for the grant, and Al was wonderful and helped us so much. And we haven't heard anything. Have they announced that already, or do you know?
Yes, so on Friday, FEMA did their announcement, but the way the procedure is they send the list to Congress. It's not official, and then they notify each state. So probably within the next few weeks, we'll be floating around with some unofficial results. And if I get my hands on them, I generally send them out and Al can trickle that down, but understand very clearly that these are all unofficial results, and the only time that it would be official was when the state of Texas will send you an email. Last year, most of them came out in mid to late September.
Okay.
And again, remember that nothing can be started until you actually not only hear that you got the award, but that you complete the procedural steps that are necessary and the state gives you the green light. So that could take a couple more months.
Okay, thank you so much.
Debbie, if a synagogue is renting space like in a strip shopping center,
yes,
are there opportunities for them to be recipients?
Yes, if you're a tenant, you are eligible. to apply for this grant, but you just need the landlord's consent for any of the improvements that you're doing. And generally, FEMA likes to know that it's not a one-year lease, because they're looking at these things as long-term improvements. So if you have a couple of years, they don't ask to see the lease. So it's sort of an unwritten request, but they do like to see the improvements stay at the facility for anywhere from 3 to 5 years. So, but yes, as a tenant, you can.
Thanks. Joan?
One more question. Do you do if you want to apply in the next year, do you have to do the vulnerability assessment each time?
So the answer to that is no, as long as you remove any of the target hardening projects that will be remediated with this grant that you just got. So it has to be current. So you can just, call up Al and he can remove that. And you don't have to have a whole nother one. Vulnerability assessments for this grant program are good for 36 months, as long as those are still vulnerabilities that are out there.
Okay, thank you.
Jason.
Real quick, Debbie, I wanted to throw a softball towards you and see what you think, because I'm sure it's on some folks' mind. As an individual institution, nonprofit, 501c3, can I apply for both the state and the federal?
That is a great question, Jason, and thanks for giving that to me, that softball to me. And the answer is yes, but you have to be very careful. You have to tread very carefully. When I say that, I mean that the state is the one that is going to be reviewing both the federal and the state grant. And you want to avoid the appearance of overlapping or double dipping, as you can call it. So if, for example, in Joan's case, if she just got the award and she requested lighting, generally you want to steer clear of requesting lighting, even if you're requesting lighting for, let's say, the front of the property versus the back of the property. You really want to be safe, because the state's going to be reviewing that, and they're going to think that you're double dipping for the same project. So you really should segregate your projects and keep them different. There are enough categories of target hardening projects that you can definitely keep things separate for the state versus the federal. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the state timeline from the time that you apply to the time that you get awarded is much shorter. So maybe you take those projects that really can't wait. So like, for example, if you have a broken lock on your door, your front door, or you have no camera or no light at the front door, that's really terrible. And that's something that really can't wait the 8 or 9 months that it will take until you get the federal award. You might want to save that for your state project. So it takes a bit of planning, but try to keep the projects separate.
Any other questions or comments? Nez, would you please email me or put in the chat your email, because I don't have it and I want to make sure you get all the material from today's meeting.
Yes.
Thanks. Just put it in the chat.
I also put in the chat the link to the Texas State Administrative Agency, and I hope that you will all go to that site and contact them and get on their email list as soon as possible.
Was that the resources?
Yeah. Well, no, it's before the resources. There was a link to the Texas Homeland Security site.
Yeah, it's her first one at 2:03 p.m.
Oh yeah, yep.
It was early on. Mm-hmm.
I see it. Okay. Okay. Robert?
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for for spending 2 hours. Hopefully this is helpful to you. You know, a la Noah's comment, I vividly remember being in graduate school, and one of my teachers said, you know, what do you do when you have a really big problem in front? And he said, you roll up your sleeves and start. So, I mean, the answer is, you know, the security is an issue for all of us, even if we've done some. There's no downside to contacting, you know, Noah or Jason and having you know, an assessment done or a walk, you know, see where you are, and then you just see where that leads you. The time is right. I mean, if you're going to really apply for next year's assessments, I mean, for next year's grant money, you've really got to kind of get moving now. You know, Debbie did a very nice job of laying that out, and you know, there's a lot of hoops to jump through to get it done, and it's got to be done on a timely basis. But now is the time. You know, as Jason said, you know, don't call me 10 days before you want your threat assessment done, which has to be done before you can apply for the grant. So thanks everybody for the 2 hours. I thank Noah a lot for organizing this. And I thank our three expert, hosts that spoke, our professional staff, really professional staff. But again, I would encourage everybody to start. And even if you think you've done what you can do in your community, there's really no downside to calling, you know, our professionals and talking to them on the phone about what you've done. And then you may decide that maybe they need to run out to where you are or not. You know, but again, starting is the most important thing you can do. With that, Noah, I think I'm good. And it's 3 o'clock.
Or if you're in Atlanta, it's 4 o'clock.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Nez.